Sherlock Holmes, one of the most fascinating characters I have ever portrayed. Patriotic, courageous, tenacious, loyal, mind of a computer, and one of the most eccentric characters in fiction. His Boswell, Dr. John H. Watson, described his strengths and weaknesses with ruthless accuracy. Knowledge of literature, philosophy, astronomy, politics, nil. Knowledge of botany, variable. Well up in belladonna, opium, and poisons generally. Knowledge of geology, chemistry, and anatomy, profound but unsystematic. Knowledge of sensational literature, immense. He appears to know every detail of every horror perpetrated in the century. He is an expert boxer, swordsman, and single-stick player. Plays the violin well, self-poisoner by tobacco and other substances. The best and wisest man whom I've ever known. Sherlock Holmes.
I won't forget that morning, not if I live to be 100. I counted the men as they marched out of the yard. They'd hardly slept for weeks. We of the CID had slept even less, but the nightmare that kept us awake was all the same nightmare. That's why we weren't surprised when the commissioner asked us up to the conference room for a bit of a talk. He'd talked to us plenty, we knew that. It didn't help any to know what was ahead of us.
Must we have that window open, Gregson?
Oh, shut it if you want to.
Chief will be in enough of a temper without having a ruddy blast down the back of his neck.
Gentlemen, the commissioner.
Stuffy in here. Be seated, won't you? Gentlemen, if you wish to know what able men you are, read any of the works of popular fiction that glamorize your achievements, but don't, I beg of you, read the daily papers. They might give you an inferiority complex. I hate to mention it, but we're confronted with a series of the most atrocious murders since Jack the Ripper. And in the meantime, the CID might as well be playing at shove halfpenny for all the good we've accomplished. Now look. Here, here, and here. Each of these red flags scattered through the city stands for a woman brutally murdered, a woman's terror, a woman's death agony. These are no ordinary crimes. These are the works of a fiend who kills first and mutilates afterwards. A ghoul who hacks off a part of his victim's body and carries it away with him. A loathsome souvenir of his butchery. 3 women murdered so far, and you haven't turned in one clue. You haven't given me one lead. Here you sit and wait for news of a 4th victim, with your arms folded.
Well, we hadn't long to wait. It was down Lambeth Way where a young woman was hurrying home late last night. She saw something and stopped. It was a constable. He spoke to her, and he walked along with her, just in case. He saw her go down the stairway to the basement lodging where she lived. We can only surmise what happened after that. my pride in my pocket and went to see the man who'd so often helped out Inspector Lestrade and myself in the past, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. If ever a man needed help, I did.
This makes 4, Inspector. 4 defenseless women here in the heart of London.
And everyone with the right forefinger hacked off.
Not hacked, Inspector Gregson. Cleanly, expertly severed. The work of a skilled surgeon. That's our only clue.
Much about the age of my sister's girl. Is there no way of stopping this, Mr. Holmes?
Yes. There's a way, somehow. The fiend that did this. I promise. I promise.
We've nothing to go on. That's the rotten part of it. We can't get far without knowing the motive.
Well, at least we know what the motives were not. It wasn't robbery, nor passion, thanks be, nor yet vengeance. Because they all came of totally unrelated families. Steady, Inspector, steady.
Sorry, Mr. Holmes. I don't turn a hair when it's a bloke that can look after himself. A little slip of a thing like that.
Yes, it's horrible. Come on, let's get a drink. Good evening, Mr. Holmes. Good evening, Vincent. Whiskey and soda, please, and a double for my friend here, Inspector Gregson.
Thank you, sir. Make mine Irish. Decent of you to give me a hand with this thing, Mr. Holmes.
Always a pleasure to be of help to Scotland Yard, Inspector.
Little out of my line, looking for a maniac who murders just for the fun of the thing.
Or perhaps just to get a human finger. In all 4 cases, the murderer risked capture by stopping to secure a finger. Wonder what for?
Who knows? He's just a madman.
Perhaps there's method in his madness. If we could just trace those missing fingers.
If we could just drain the English Channel, we might find a penny. Huh?
Oh, thank you. You may keep those, Mr. Holmes. Thank you.
Sir George Fenwick, isn't it?
Yes.
Is that his daughter with him?
Don't be so naive, Inspector.
You know everyone, don't you, darling?
Well, hardly. A week ago, I didn't know you.
A week. How fast it's gone.
I collect these things.
How very quaint of you.
Shall we go?
Yes.
What are you looking at, Mr. Holmes?
Looking at a very handsome woman. Not for want of the purple, but giving an excellent imitation.
Would you like to come to my flat for a nightcap?
Lovely idea.
Yes, isn't it?
Wonder where she's taking Sir George Fenwick.
Don't be so naive, Mr. Holmes.
Good evening, Mum.
Hello, Grandon. Any messages?
No, Mum.
Thank you. Drinks, Crandon. One of your nice surprises.
Yes, Mum.
I say, you don't mean that...
Crandon's a marvel, aren't you, Crandon?
Yes, Mum.
You wouldn't believe the things she can do.
Ah, charming place. Delightful.
Really? Do you think so? I'm so glad. Do sit down. Do you mind?
Do I mind? What a question. I don't mind anything, really. Except not being with you.
Now, you really don't want me to believe that, do you?
Not too seriously.
Good. We're both quite grown up, aren't we?
Quite.
You're a treasure, Crandon. And lower the lights a little as you leave. I prefer a more flattering light.
In any light, you'd be...
Would I?
And don't you know it?
Perhaps I do. Oh, that priceless woman. You wouldn't believe it, but she's absurdly romantic. She loves dreamy music, and she thinks that we...
But we do, don't we?
Do we?
Well, it's rather soothing, restful.
Yes. And we all need rest at times, like tired children who've played too long. You've played with wooden soldiers, I suppose.
Funny. Hadn't thought of that for years.
Toy boats were my special joy. Anything I could set afloat anywhere. Like this. And this. Toy boats sailing into the Never Never Land. The land of beautiful dreams. Look. Look, odd, isn't it, how the light is reflected? Little specks of light that move and move. Like stars on a slowly moving stream.
You know, Holmes, I'm very sensitive to atmosphere.
Oh?
Yes, I can tell by the feel of this room there's been a murder committed here.
It may interest you to know, my dear fellow, it was the other side of that door at the foot of the stairs that the poor girl was murdered. If only I could find it.
Find what?
The one thing these unfortunate victims have in common that might give us a motive for these murders. There must be something.
Another Jack the Ripper, if you ask me, a homicidal maniac.
No, Watson. In the case of Jack the Ripper, there was one thing in common. His victims were all from one walk of life, living in the same section of the city. In this case, the murderer chooses his victims from all walks of life and from different sections of the city. No, my dear fellow, this is not the work of a homicidal maniac. It's something infinitely more sinister.
You mean the creeps? What on earth are you talking about?
Watson, I'm convinced that these murders are only incidental to some larger and more diabolical scheme.
That may be, but why the severed fingers?
The answer to that question, my dear fellow, is our only hope of solving these mysteries.
Yes, sister, I am so happy. I had such a lovely holiday at Brighton with you and Alf. And I'm looking forward to being with you again. Poor little thing. Sort of raises a lump in your throat. I can picture her sitting here happily writing this letter. And a lot bit realizing that she's shortly going to her death. Hello? Gregson.
Oh, there you are, Mr. Holmes. I've been looking for you everywhere.
What's happened?
Murder in Edgeware Road, not half an hour ago.
Woman?
Yes. And the right forefinger cut off clean.
Papers! All for murder, papers, all about the murder. Morning papers.
All about the murder. Paper. Horrible murder. Another young woman found murdered. Papers here. Horrible murder. Paper. Paper. Read all about it. Get your paper. Murder in Edgware Road. Horrible finger murder. Shocking murder. Murder in Edgware Road. Horrible murder of a young woman. Read all about the murder.
Oh, Miss Anne, there's been another of those horrible murders.
Dear, dear, how shocking.
Yes, Mum. I really don't feel quite safe here myself. Oh, dear. Why, Sir George!
I must see Miss Marlowe at once.
I don't know if she...
I must see her. Where is she? Lydia.
Why, Sir George, what is it? What happened?
I don't know. You'll have to help me. You've got to help me.
But I don't understand.
Listen. I woke up a few minutes ago in a cheap boarding house off Edgware Road. I don't know how I came there. I don't know when. The last thing I remember is being here with you.
Calm yourself, Sir George.
When did I leave here?
Well, it was about, it was 10:45, Mum. Precisely. You seemed, forgive me, just a little distressed. Detached, not interested. I thought I'd said something to offend you.
I don't remember. I can't remember.
Tell me, has this happened to you before?
Before?
Well, there is such a thing as amnesia, you know.
If it was 10:45 when I left you, it was 9 this morning when I woke. Over 10 hours lost. 10 hours that I can't account for. And in my pocket when I woke, I found... Here, in my pocket. That isn't...
Oh, it's not for you, of course. It can't be. Excuse me, Mum, but there's a man asking to see the gentleman. Send him away. Yes, Mum.
No, please. I'll see him.
Well? Delightful room. Not much like the place you woke up in this morning.
You followed me here?
Yes.
Are you a detective?
Oh, no. Quite the contrary. Don't be afraid, Sir George.
You know my name?
Oh, yes. A very old and highly honored name. And being the bearer of such a name, and also a very wealthy man, I thought you might care to possess yourself this trifle. Rather than let it fall into the hands of the police. It is yours, if I'm not mistaken. The initials, GF.
Where did you get this?
It came out of your pocket. I saw it fall, but you never noticed. You were very busy, bending over something with a knife. Then you put something in your pocket.
Come along, Holmes, come along, come along. How many more Harrisons, I tell you? You're missing a treat. This is delicious. Little jam tarts to follow. Aren't you tempted?
You and your flesh pots.
They tell me that fish is good for the brain.
Brains haven't any. You realize that a whole day and a night have gone by since that bestial affair in Edgware Road? I'm as much in the dark as ever. Hello. here comes a client, unless I'm very much mistaken.
Well, oh, attractive. Very attractive.
Obviously, she left home under the stress of some very great emotion.
How do you know that?
She isn't wearing any gloves. A startling omission in a young lady of fashion.
No, she didn't put her coat on. Open car, too.
Furthermore, there's something in that bag she wants to show me.
What makes you say that?
The bag doesn't match her dress, indicating it was picked for size rather than style, to accommodate some bulky object.
You amaze me, Holmes.
What I meant to, my dear fellow. Well, that's it.
What is?
A cab, turning at the empty house. I wonder why he followed her here.
Oh, wouldn't you?
Quite possibly with glasses. Well, we shall soon know. Yes, Mrs. Hudson?
It's a young lady, sir. Most urgent.
Ask her to come in.
Go right in, miss.
Mr. Holmes?
Yes, this is my friend, Dr. Watson.
How do you do?
How do you do? Mr. Holmes, you must excuse me, please.
Yes, well, won't you sit down?
Come along.
May I? It's quite all right. Thank you. Now, try to control yourself. Miss Fenwick, you're with friends.
You know my name?
No magic, I assure you. I've often seen your picture. You're the daughter of Sir George Fenwick, aren't you?
Yes. It's about my father that I...
What about your father, Miss Fenwick?
Oh, I don't know what to do. He's always been the nicest, dearest person. Only since Mother died.
Yes, we do. We know.
So I didn't think anything of it when he was away all the night before last. But he didn't come home until yesterday at tea time. Didn't come in for dinner at all. Just paced up and down in the library hour after hour. I begged him to let me in, but he wouldn't.
Steady, steady. Now, take your time.
I couldn't sleep a wink last night. Then I started hearing things.
Hearing things? What sort of things?
I heard someone in the garden underneath my window. Then I saw a figure moving down the garden path. And I recognized my father. Stealing through his own garden like a thief. He had a spade in his hand, and he stopped by the greenhouse where he started to dig. This morning, at daybreak, I stole out into the garden and found this.
A finger. A human finger.
Bring up Scotland Yard, will you, Watson? Ask them to get hold of Inspector Gregson and tell him to meet us at once at George Fenwick's house, Kingston.
Operator, get me Scotland Yard quick.
Where's my father, Norris?
He's still in the library, miss.
Thank you. We'll see him right away. Will you come with me, please?
Thank you.
I got your message, Mr. Holmes.
Yes, indeed.
Dad, may I come in? Dad. Honey? He doesn't answer.
You mind?
Please do.
Thank you. Watson, quick.
Oh,
Come along,
no,
my dear.
no, no.
Take charge, Miss Fenwick, please. Now, miss, please. Please come along with me.
Dead?
Yes.
What do you make of it, Doctor?
Shot in the back, between the second and third ribs. The bullet undoubtedly had penetrated the heart. Look at the powder marks on his coat.
I was afraid of this.
What do you mean?
Don't you remember the man in the cab who followed Miss Finnick to Baker Street?
Well, you don't think he had anything to do with it, do you?
I think it's reasonable to assume that he tipped off someone that I'd been sent for. George has obviously been murdered to keep him from telling me what he knew. What was the weapon used?
Small caliber revolver, point blank range, by the look of the wound.
The murderer came in through those French windows. The mud from the garden he brought in his boots. Sir George must have surprised the intruder. Passed the room to him here. What follows, we can't tell. But from the location of the wound, I'd say that he turned his back for a moment, and as he turned, the muzzle of the revolver was placed between his ribs and one muffled shot fired.
And you mean to say he kept on going, even after he was shot?
There's no doubt about it. Look there. The trail of blood leads us back to the desk. There's something Sir George was after. Something.
I know. He was trying to summon help, poor chap.
I don't think so, Watson. There's the bell pulled by the fireplace. No, you'll notice from the trail of blood that Sir George made straight for this desk here. I wonder, there was something he was desperately anxious to get. Hello. His right hand's clenched.
Perfectly natural. Death agony.
The left hand lies open. Why only one hand clenched in the death agony? The right hand, the hand nearest the desk. Please note that. If Sir George took something off this desk, something so important that he spilled his last drop of blood to get it, I want to know what it is.
Nothing but an ordinary match folder.
Where does that lead us?
I imagine to something very important, Gregson. This match folder's from Pembroke House.
Why shouldn't it be? He was there, you know. We saw him yesterday.
Yes, but the effort he made after he was shot to get hold of this match folder. It's just possible he wanted someone to remember Pembroke House. He may have wished to recall it to someone who saw him there. Someone who, like ourselves, saw him with a woman.
Come in.
Oh, Dr. Watson, this came by hand for Mr. Holmes, not 10 minutes ago.
Thank you, Mrs. Hudson.
That would be the report from Mr. George's bank.
What was it? Oh, really?
Don't you remember his account? Had it looked into at once. He drew out his entire balance in cash, nearly £10,000, yesterday, just after that young woman was murdered. What does that suggest you, Watson?
Well, he paid it out to someone.
Precisely. I smell the faint, sweet odor of blackmail.
You don't think he paid it out to someone who saw him murder the McLean woman?
Sir George never murdered anyone.
But he did have that woman's finger, and he empty did have and pay out a lot of cash.
That's the terrifying part about blackmail, Watson. The victim is afraid to fight the accusation no matter how false. Once the accusation is made, the name is smeared, and sometimes his life is ruined.
Well, Sir George didn't commit these murders. What fiend did?
I rather think they're not the work of any one man.
Oh, come, Holmes. You don't expect me to believe there's a whole organization going about killing people and chopping off their fingers.
No, it's possible, quite possible.
Well, whoever's behind all this thing must be out of his mind.
On the contrary, my dear fellow, if my assumptions are correct, this little scheme has behind it the most brilliant and ruthless intellect the world has ever known.
You don't mean Professor Moriarty?
I do.
Oh, steady, Holmes. You've got him on the brain. This is the third time in as many months he was suspected him of unsolved crimes. He's dead, you know.
Is he?
Is he? You know he is. He was hanged in Montevideo, well, over a year ago.
I know that someone was hanged in Montevideo under that name. But I'll stake my reputation that Moriarty is alive and here, now, in London. Hello? Yes, but Dr. Watson, wait a minute.
Me? Well, yes. This is Dr. Watson speaking. No, I'm afraid I've retired. I don't practice anymore. What? Oh, that's a different thing. An emergency case. Well, just a minute. Yes? Yes, well, see if she's not moved. Remember that. Don't touch her till I get there. Fractured case in McCardle's Mews. Heavy woman. 14 stone. Whew. Look at dust. 14 stone. Whew. Just the sort of person who would hoist herself up on a stool to feed the canary. There ought to be a law against fat people keeping little dicky birds. Well, I won't be very long. I haven't used that bag since I brought little Amelia, what's the name in the world? Grew up to be a very unattractive child. Oh, who wouldn't with a name like Amelia? What Amelia? Amelia. Stupid about it.
Oh, Professor Moriarty. Not that I wish to appear inquisitive, but to what am I indebted for the pleasure of this visit? Scotland Yard will be interested.
It's very convenient for me to have Scotland Yard think that I'm still dead in Montevideo. I never dreamed of fooling you.
Thank you.
The thought occurs to me, Mr. Holmes, that there are some advantages in living within the law. You're very comfortably fixed here, aren't you? As I get on in life, the little comforts appeal to me more and more.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Won't you sit down?
Thank you.
And now, Professor Moriarty, what can I do for you?
Everything that I have to say to you has already crossed your mind.
And my answer has no doubt crossed yours.
That's final?
What do you think? I shall not rest until you are hanged for the finger murders.
There's no proof, you know.
No, not a shred. But I have you. I could turn you over to the police here and now.
You could. But if you did, you'd never see Dr. Watson again.
Oh, the telephone call.
Quite.
I rather assumed you had taken some such precaution. Or I should have snatched up a revolver and indulged in a fit of heroics when you came in.
Very smart, aren't you?
Not smart enough. Or I should have anticipated you. But if any harm comes to Dr. Watson, I shall seek you out. I shall not rest until I find you, and when I do...
No harm will come to Dr. Watson this time. But I can't answer for the future. Mr. Holmes, I should strongly advise you to drop this case.
Don't be silly.
Think it over. We've had many encounters in the past. You hope to place me on the gallows. I tell you I shall never stand up on the gallows. But if you are instrumental in any way in bringing about my destruction, you will not be alive to enjoy your satisfaction.
And we shall walk together through the gates of eternity, hand in hand.
What a charming picture that would make.
Yes, wouldn't it? You know, I really think it might be worth it.
Shoelaces got tuppence a pair. And strong enough to hang yourself.
How many more times since I tell you I don't want your filthy shoelaces or your company?
Shoelaces, Governor?
Lots of impertinence. Run along, my good man, or I'll give you in charge.
Shoelaces, Governor? Shoelaces, Governor? Help a poor bloke. What's only got one arm? Any luck with Mr. Holmes?
You can read his obituary in tomorrow's papers. Oh, there you are, Watson. Come in. I was, just going out to look for you.
Look for me what for? Well, you don't think I know my way about? Well, you're right, I don't. Blast all practical jokers anyhow. Know where I've been?
On a wild goose chase.
Exactly. There's no such number in McCardle's Muse. Some fool's idea of a joke.
Did you see anyone?
No, nobody especially. Only a whining old idiot selling bootlaces.
Assistant baker, wasn't he? Stuck you like grim death.
Oh, how do you know?
Finally, I left you for someone who looked like Philip Pickings. Someone, my dear Watson, was Professor Moriarty himself.
What?
Just called on me.
Moriarty here and you let him go? But you must be out of your mind. Why?
Well, he bluffed me into believing that he was holding a friend of mine as hostage.
Friend of yours who?
Oh, nobody very important, just a fat, lazy fellow. Medical man, I believe.
Medical man? Do I know him?
Yes, I think you do. A fellow by the name of Watson.
Watson, never heard. Who, me?
I'm afraid so, old fellow. Your street hawker's job was to do away with you in a certain contingency.
And you let Moriarty go? Because of me?
I had no choice. I can't afford to lose you, old fellow.
Well, it's very decent of the old chap, I must say, but... well, I wish you'd nabbed him.
We shall, never fear. I know the motive for the finger murders. All I have to find out now is the method used with the blackmail victims.
Method?
Yes. How does Moriarty get them to the scene of the crime? How does he plant those severed fingers on them? And how does he scare them into believing that they may have committed those atrocious murders themselves? Curious. Very curious.
Huh? Curious? What's curious?
That window in the empty house across the street. First floor front.
Huh? What's wrong with it?
It's open.
Well, shouldn't it be open?
Well, it wasn't open half an hour ago. I'll stake my life on that.
Well, it's not our business. So stay open.
I wonder if you'd go over, old fellow, and see what's the matter.
Trespassing. Against the law.
Well, I'll go myself.
Oh, well, if you're going to put it like that, ridiculous waste of time. Think about shutting windows at this hour of the night.
Yeah, you better take this torch.
Well, take what? Dignified job for a doctor. Dr. Watson, the torchbearer. And what do you propose to do? Sit in a comfortable chair, I suppose, and read a good book.
That's a very good idea.
Yes, very good idea. While I play night watchman, you have a nice read.
Mm-hmm. Good night. Have a good time.
Have a good time. What do you mean? For? Oh, umbrella stand. Pretty little thing to keep about the house. Must have been a pet. Right, Cobra. Oh. Well, he sits comfortably reading a book. He killed Holmes! He killed Sherlock!
Watson.
You? But I saw him shoot you a second ago.
Not me, my dear fellow. Merely the bust of Julius Caesar. Incidentally, you may have noticed that all through the ages, prominent men have prominent noses. Oh, I'm afraid we're in for terrible trouble again with Mrs. Hudson. Windows smashed, plaster all over the floor. Get up, you.
Corporal Williams, Middlesex Regiment. Discharged from the army as physically unfit. Yeah. Papers seem in order.
Now, Corporal Williams, you've seen service in the Far East, haven't you?
The East.
I thought so. Look at his complexion, Watson. Yellow as saffron. He's been taking antibrine. Cure for malaria. Sniper, aren't you?
Sniper.
Why did you try to kill me?
I had to kill him. I had to. Oh, snap out of it.
Stop it, Watson.
He's shamming.
No, he isn't. Who told you to kill me?
She told me.
She told you?
She told me I couldn't miss. Well, luckily you did miss, you murderer.
She isn't a murderer, Watson. Listen, Corporal Williams. She told you you had to do it, didn't she?
I had to do it.
I've got it, Watson, I've got it.
Got what?
The method used in the finger murders.
Well, what is it?
Hypnotism, my dear fellow, hypnotism. And it wasn't against his nature, that's the devilish part of it. They picked a man for that purpose whose job was sniping. Who are they? Professor Moriarty and his finger murderers. Williams spoke of a woman. I think you'll find that she asked him home tonight for a drink. Nice quiet rooms, soft lights, music.
You got it all pat, Mr. Holmes. What's the lady look like?
Up 30, nice figure, blonde, lustrous eyes.
Oh, really? Got a phone number? Oh, so?
Williams will give us her address. Look after him, Gregson. Don't let anyone come near him. He's our key witness in the finger murders.
Well, I hope you're guessing right, Mr. Holmes.
Get up, Williams. Now, go with Inspector Gregson anywhere he tells you.
Come on.
Yeah. Ring me as soon as he comes to himself, will you?
I will. Good night, gentlemen.
Good night.
Well, if you believe that fellow Williams was hypnotized, I suppose you think Sir George Fenwick was hypnotized, too.
I'm quite sure of it. Have a cup of tea?
Thanks, old boy. Nothing to eat. Well, why didn't these people make Sir George do the murder himself?
Because they didn't want to get him hanged. They wanted to blackmail him.
Well, who do you think the actual murderer is?
One of Moriarty's gang. A diabolically simple technique. Kill a woman.
Yes. But why cut off the fingers?
My dear fellow, don't you understand? The severed finger is what links the blackmail victim to the murder. He wakes, finds the grisly thing in his pocket. Doesn't know how it got there. He's no idea that he's been hypnotized. For all he knows, he may have committed the atrocious crime during some dreadful lapse of sanity.
In that state, when he's utterly demoralized, the blackmailers take over. Is that it?
Undoubtedly. You see, they swear that they saw him commit the murder. And being human, the victim will pay anything rather than stand trial on a charge that will make his very name loathsome.
Well, it all fits in if you believe in hypnotism.
The only possible explanation.
Do you think the hypnotist is that woman with the blonde hair and the lustrous eyes, the woman you invented?
I didn't invent her. I saw her.
What on earth are you talking about?
That woman, my dear Watson, was with Sir George when he left Pembroke House. I saw her there. I shall see her again, and Williams will lead me to her. That's why it's so important to keep him safe. He will identify her. Hello? Yes? Inspector Gregson? What? Well, get every constable in the district. Yes, I'll be over at once.
What's happened, Holmes?
Williams is missing.
Great Scott!
Come on. Lorry crashed into Gregson's car. During the confusion, Williams disappeared.
Escaped, eh?
No, kidnapped. To keep him from talking when he came to.
You don't think that Moriarty...
Moriarty? Anything is possible.
Williams!
Dead. You see? Anything is possible.
Oh, good morning, Professor Moriarty. You startled me. I'm dressing another dolly, a dear little nurse. Is there anything wrong with your finger?
Just a splinter.
Nasty thing, splinters. Most trying. One can't be too careful, but I'll get it out for you. I have the very instrument to help you. Sharp enough to split a hair.
Put those tools away until they're needed.
But they're not tools, sir. They're instruments.
Put them away. Is Lydia in?
Yes. But really, you should let me.
Get dressed. Holmes and Watson just left Baker Street for the Mesmer Club.
Mesmer Club? The meeting place of all the top hypnotists in London. Do you suppose that Mr. Holmes is onto our method?
If he suspects, it's merely a suspicion. It's our business to see that it ends there.
I hope you're right.
Williams passed away before he could talk, remember?
What do you want me to do?
Go to the Mesmer Club, meet Holmes, and induce him to come back here.
Isn't that a bit dangerous?
Every meeting with Sherlock Holmes is potentially dangerous. However, you say he didn't see your face at Pembroke House.
And how would you suggest I get Mr. Holmes to accompany me here? Kidnap him?
Oh, no. Holmes has one weakness, his insatiable curiosity. If you can arouse that, you can lead him anywhere. It's up to you to take advantage of any opportunity that may arise.
This way, please, gentlemen. I'll tell Dr. Onslow that you're here.
Thank you.
And this is the Mesmer Club. If you ask me, hypnotism is a lot of mumbo-jumbo.
Oh, come now, Watson. As a medical man, you must admit that hypnotism has its place in modern science.
That may be, but 90% of hypnotists are crooks of the worst kind. Nothing more than a lot of charlatans exploiting weak-willed morons.
Ah, Dr. Onslow, I believe.
Happy to meet you, Mr. Holmes. Your brother Mycroft suggested I might be of help to you. He's a valued member of our little group of charlatans and crooks.
Oh, beg your pardon, sir. I didn't know you were listening. Behind the curtain.
My friend, Dr. Watson.
Oh, delighted.
Oh, do you?
I wonder now. You see, we're in the midst of a little experimental session at this very moment. If you'd care to join us.
Oh, certainly,
I'd
certainly.
be very instructive.
Oh, well, will you follow me?
Thank you.
Why should I know that we're behind the blossom clinical?
In treating his patients. But today, the therapeutic value of hypnotism, as we now call it, is conceded by innumerable physicians. Especially is it of value in surgical cases where the administration of local or of general anesthetic is inadvisable.
Inadvisable poppycock.
For the sake of latecomers, I may say that I have placed this subject under profound hypnosis. In this condition, he can feel no pain, even under applications which normally would be excruciating.
Excruciating? Oh.
You excuse me, please.
Carter, you are having a peaceful sleep. You feel nothing. Your arms and your hands are without sensation. Mowbray, the long needle. Carter, give me your right hand. As you observe, the needle has been thrust completely through the subject's hand. No feeling, no pain. This lack of feeling is the one infallible test of profound hypnosis.
Nonsense. Fellow's full of drugs. Oh, isn't he?
Definitely not, Doctor.
Wake up, Carter, wake up. You feel well and rested, remember. No pain anywhere. Wake up, wake up.
I say, when are you going to begin?
All through, Carter. Stand up.
This way, sir.
And, are these all the people that come here?
Oh, no. Others keep dropping in all the time.
I suppose it's all right for those who believe in it, but of course, I'm a professional man myself.
Then you don't believe in hypnotism, Dr. Watson?
Oh, I don't deny that there are certain types of hysterical, feeble-minded people who go under if you point your finger at them. But anyone with an ounce of character...
How right you are. You see right through our little artifices, don't you, Doctor?
Right through, my dear sir. Right through.
Right so. But with the feeble-minded, as you say... excuse us, Mr. Holmes.
Certainly.
Step over here, won't you?
Certainly, sir. Anything to oblige.
Let me show you how easily we charlatans take advantage of them. Now, sit down, Doctor. Now, we set a thing like this in motion. It's wonderful, the attraction on the feeble-minded, of course. The continuous motion, if they just let themselves follow it. Of course, you could stare at it till doomsday, Dr. Watson, with no effect at all. Still, it might make you a little drowsy, like the white ribbon of road at night when you're driving. The rhythm is smooth, unbroken, and the road goes on and on, round and round, always the same, winding and winding. And you're drowsy, you're tired. Let the road come into you, as it were. The long road, the smooth road, the road to sleep. Sleep. Open your eyes. Stand up. Turn around. And now, Dr. Watson, you're on a holiday in Scotland. The country is amazingly beautiful. We're coming to a stream. It isn't deep. Better take your shoes and socks off. Roll up your trouser. That will do. The other leg is waterproof. Turn around. Mind the pedals. Sit down. Wake up now.
Yeah, I see. What did I tell you? It didn't work with me. Why, nobody with an ounce of character.
I think you'll need these.
Nothing to laugh at.
Watson, she's here.
Oh, the woman you're looking for?
Yes, I'm going to meet her. Perhaps I can induce her to take me to Moriarty.
Do you think it's wise, Holmes?
May not be wise, but it's essential. After all, I've held me on with Moriarty in the past.
But isn't it dangerous? She might be a hypnotist.
My will isn't stronger than hers. I deserve to be hypnotized.
I feel I must protest, Dr. Onslow. I was told this was a gathering of serious students of a great science, and I find myself in a company of buffoons.
Oh, my dear madam.
Eliot and Esdale brave. Were those men martyrs for the truth, that you may laugh over your childish, cruel tricks?
I must say I'm in complete agreement with you, madam. This was most unnecessary performance, Dr. Onslow.
Beg your pardon, sir.
My name is Holmes, Sherlock Holmes. At your service, madam.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. I'm afraid I've created a rather embarrassing situation. But you see, I'm interested in the serious study of hypnotism.
So am I, too.
Perhaps we have something in common, Mr. Holmes.
Perhaps we have. Would you join me for a cocktail at Pembroke House?
I should be delighted.
Good. Thank you.
I didn't know there was such a pleasant place in London. It was so nice of you to suggest our coming here.
I thought a little pick-me-up would do us good.
You mean you thought I looked...
I like the way you look.
Thank you. I suppose I did lose my head a little at the Mesmer Club. But you see, hypnotism is almost a religion with me. I know so well what it can do to help, heal. And I can't bear to see it used for trivial purposes.
I know very little about it. That's why I went to the Mesmer Club. You see, I'm rather puzzled just now with the case that I'm working on.
How fascinating. Tell me about it.
It's the murder of Sir George Fenwick.
Fenwick? Who's he?
Quite a well-known figure. Odd now I come to think of it. Last time I saw Sir George was here at Pembroke House.
Strange.
Yes, isn't it? He was sitting, I believe he was sitting at this very table. Cigarette?
Thanks. Do go on.
There was a charming lady with him. He was lighting a cigarette.
Charming. Did you see her face?
No, West Night. Merely her back.
How unenterprising of you.
Yes, wasn't it? Afraid I'm getting a little older.
I shouldn't say so.
That's nice of you. Still, the first time in my life, I've got hold of a case that's beyond me. I'm actually losing sleep over it.
You know, Mr. Holmes, I believe I could help you.
Really? I should be very grateful.
You're amused.
Oh, merely skeptical. How would you go about it?
I've used hypnotism more than once in healing. Not for profit. I'm not a professional. But I do think I could help you. If you care to...
I can't think of a pleasanter experience.
Low light, music, is that all there is to it?
You must relax, Mr. Holmes. I'm afraid you're a rather difficult subject. So I thought perhaps a little help. Materia medica might be advisable.
Drugs? No, I'd rather not, if you don't mind.
As a matter of fact, I'd rather not myself. But Schrenk-Notzing, who practiced in Munich, you know, believed it the best means for difficult subjects. Do you mind?
Well, as a matter of fact, I don't approve of sedatives.
Just as you wish. We don't have to go on with this at all, you know.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. All right. I'll take a chance.
It's really quite harmless.
What is it?
Cannabis japonica, an oriental soporific. You need water.
Thank you.
You'll feel yourself growing drowsy. Don't fight it. Give in to it. Because you do want to sleep, you know. Just fix your eyes on this one white flower, floating on the water. Empty your mind of every other thought. Follow the motion of the water. So smooth. Not a ripple. Waters of forgetfulness. Steady. Deep. Strong. Strange, isn't it? How the light is reflected. Little specks of light that move and move. It's restful here. It's peaceful. It's friendly. And you're very close to finding what you're looking for. You'll find them soon now. The guilty ones. rested. Gentle waters closing over you. Steady. Deep. Strong. Drawing you down. 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 Sleep. Sleep. Sleep.
Here he is, Professor Moriarty. Stand up, Mr. Holmes. Open your eyes. Face this way. Are you satisfied?
We are dealing with a clever man. He may be shamming. There's just one infallible test for profound hypnosis. You ready, Dr. Simnel? That will do, Doctor. He couldn't fake insensibility to the knife. I congratulate you, Lydia. Turn round, Mr. Holmes. Now walk to the desk. Sit down. Take that pen and write what I tell you to write. I have at last found a case which I cannot solve. I have outlived my usefulness. Therefore, I have decided to end my life. Sign your name. Now blot it. Fold it up. And put it in your pocket. Come, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Go out onto the terrace.
But it won't look like suicide, sir.
I'm sorry, but Mr. Holmes' injuries must all be self-inflicted. Let's walk a little, Mr. Holmes. It's so pleasant here in the garden. Just step up here onto the terrace. It's a nice, broad terrace. Now turn to the left and walk slowly to the end of the terrace. Don't stop. You must walk to the end, you know. The end leads to an open doorway. You can pass through it in perfect safety. In the room beyond the doorway, you'll find what you've been looking for.
Must you drag this on?
This is the moment I've been anticipating for a long time, my dear. Go on, Mr. Holmes. Through the open doorway, you will find the man responsible for the finger murders and the death of Sir George Penny. Professor Moriarty.
Holmes!
Stand still.
What a beautiful view, Watson. I'm quite enjoying it.
No, you're not. You're hypnotized. You're under a spell. Stand still. Don't move. Steady, Holmes. Steady does it. Stand perfectly still where you are.
Nonsense, Watson.
You don't know what you're doing.
Of course I know what I'm doing.
You mean you're not hypnotized?
Certainly not.
Then get off the wall, you idiot. Oh, look out! Holmes!
Dear fellow.
What were you doing up there?
Holding the fort until you arrived. What kept you?
Oh, I ran into a spot of trouble on my way to Scotland Yard. I was arrested for exceeding the speed limit.
Your luck seems to hold, Mr. Holmes.
I'd hardly call it luck, Professor. You see, I substituted a drug of my own for the one that this dear lady pressed on me.
You are clever, aren't you?
A drug that, although it leaves the subject conscious, renders him quite insensitive to pain. That accounted for my lack of reaction to Dr. Simnel's knife. Well, Gregson, quite an impressive haul. Even Inspector Lestrade himself couldn't have done any better.
Thanks, Mr. Holmes.
Take him away.
All right, put her in the van.
I was right, Mr. Holmes. You are a difficult subject.
Thank you. And now, Professor, our score is settled. Au revoir until I see you on the gallows.
The rope has not been made that'll go around my neck.
Come on.
I'll take care of things, Mr. Holmes.
Thank you, Inspector.
Come on.
An evil man, Holmes, but what a horrible death.
Better than he deserved.
What are you thinking of?
I'm thinking of all the women who can come and go in safety in the streets of London tonight. Stars keep watch in the heavens. And in our own little way, we too, old friend, are privileged to watch over our city.
Begin an investigation.
Based on what? Your imagination?
It was obviously a suicide.
Never trust the obvious.
Uncle didn't kill himself.
Before a lifetime of adventure came the adventure of a lifetime.
What's your name?
Holmes. Sherlock Holmes.
You are the police?
My name is Sherlock Holmes.
I want to help you. My name is Sherlock Holmes.
Good evening, Lord Carfax.
And what, may I ask, do you think of that, Mr. Holmes?
Sherlock Holmes, the best and wisest man whom I've ever known. How do you do? I'm your host, Christopher Lee. Now, we shall have a look at this man among men, as impersonated by dozens of actors in hundreds of plays, films, and broadcasts. We shall meet his creator, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and we shall see the land which they knew and loved. You are cordially invited to join us as we examine the many faces of Sherlock Holmes. Every year, thousands of Sherlock Holmes enthusiasts flock to London to see the locations where fiction's greatest detective pursued his vocation. The Sherlock Holmes Hotel, an excellent starting place for a tour of Sherlock Holmes London. When you finally make your way to 221 Baker Street, don't be surprised if you find a bank. But rest assured, the legend of Holmes still lives on. In fact, the bank has a full-time employee who does nothing but answer the great detective's mail.
Well, I do hope you've given the woman a soul. She had one, you know.
By the woman, I suppose you mean Irene Adler.
Yes.
For Sherlock Holmes, Irene Adler was the woman, the only person who ever bested him. She lived in a fictitious house on a fictitious street in this very real and exclusive neighborhood, St. John's Wood. Scotland Yard, headquarters of Inspector Lestrade, the detective who so frequently took all the credit for Holmes's brilliant work.
Where is Lestrade?
Well, I imagine at the moment he's pretty well occupied.
Just a minute, MacDonald. Get over there, all of you. You're under arrest. Now, put up your hands.
The River Thames, scene of a spectacular chase in The Sign of Fall. Before the maniacal South Sea islander Tonga could use his deadly blowpipe, Holmes shot him dead. His bones lie at the bottom of the river. Eerie Loch Ness in Scotland. Only in the movies did Sherlock Holmes encounter the Loch Ness monster, which turned out to be an ingenious submarine. Whitechapel, one of the most notorious areas of Victorian London. In these blood-stained back streets, Sherlock Holmes, of the movies, twice defeated the most dreaded criminal of his time, Jack the Ripper. Sherlock Holmes, one of the most fascinating characters I have ever portrayed. His Boswell, Dr. John H. Watson, described his strengths and weaknesses with ruthless accuracy. Knowledge of literature, philosophy, astronomy, politics, nil. Knowledge of botany, variable. Well up in belladonna, opium, and poisons generally. Knowledge of geology, chemistry, and anatomy, profound but unsystematic. Knowledge of sensational literature, immense. He appears to know every detail of every horror perpetrated in the century. He is an expert boxer, swordsman, and single-stick player. Plays the violin well, self-poisoner by tobacco and other substances. The best and wisest man whom I've ever known. Sherlock Holmes.
Occasionally to read detective stories. It always annoyed me how in the old-fashioned detective story, the detective always seemed to get at his results either by some sort of lucky chance or a fluke, or else it was quite unexplained how he got there. He got there, but he Never gave an explanation how. Well, that didn't seem to me quite playing the game. It seemed to me that he's bound to give his reasons why he came to his conclusions. Well, once I began to think about this, I began to think of turning scientific methods, as it were, onto the work of detection. And I used, as a student, to have an old professor, his name was Bell, who was extraordinarily quick at deductive work.
Arthur Conan Doyle was only 17 years of age when he first encountered Dr. Joseph Bell at Edinburgh University. 11 years later, the master of the scientific method was transformed into the world's first amateur consulting detective in the first Sherlock Holmes story, A Study in Scarlet. 3 years passed before Conan Doyle was persuaded to return to the detective he had once considered calling Sherrinford Holmes. This time, it was an American on the staff of Lippincott's magazine who commissioned a new novel for simultaneous publication in England and America, The Sign of 4. Again, Conan Doyle thought he was finished with Sherlock Holmes, but the following year, George Newnes, editor of the brand new magazine, The Strand, published a series of Holmes stories, starting with the 7th issue, July 1891. Again, Conan Doyle foolishly wiped his hands after the 12 were in print. The public and the publishers, however, would not let go. Against every personal desire except the one for money, he obtained a lucrative contract for 11 more stories and then drew his own plans against the life of Sherlock Holmes. In the final problem, the last in the series, he introduced an arch-criminal, Professor Moriarty, who, in his only appearance in a Holmes story, did the unthinkable. He killed Sherlock Holmes. The two, locked in a death struggle, tumbled into the Reichenbach Falls in Switzerland, never to be seen again, Conan Doyle fervently prayed. No such luck. The die had been cast and had landed a winner of such proportions that its very creator remained baffled for the rest of his life. Even as Holmes and Moriarty battled above the cataracts, matters were being taken out of Arthur Conan Doyle's hands. For that very year, 1893, saw Sherlock Holmes appear before the public in the flesh for the first time. Charles Brookfield became the very first portrayer of Sherlock Holmes in a musical revue at London's Royal Court Theatre. Under the Clock had Holmes singing and dancing with Dr. Watson. But it was not until 1899 that Holmes came into his own as a dramatic entity. A Connecticut Yankee named William Gillette wrote an original drama in which he starred on Broadway to resounding success. Gillette portrayed Holmes on stage, screen, and radio for the next 36 years. In England, H.A. Saintsbury enjoyed extraordinary success with Gillette's play, touring the country for 20 years, taking time off to make one film as Holmes. Among the minor players in Saintsbury's 1903 tour was a boy who played two parts. It was Charlie Chaplin, later to become one of the greatest of all screen performers. Thomas Edison produced the first film of the great detective in 1900. The name of the actor who played in Sherlock Holmes Baffled is lost to history, but the film itself exists, the first of over 100 silent productions from 6 countries. Universal produced A Study in Scarlet in 1914, starring director John Ford's brother, Francis. William Gillette brought his famous stage play to the screen in 1916. Despite his 63 years, his performance gained critical acclaim and reaffirmed his virtual ownership of the character. The screen's most prolific Holmes was Ellie Norwood, who appeared in a staggering total of 47 films in 3 years. Conan Doyle admired Gillette and Norwood above all others in the role. Samuel Goldwyn filmed the Gillette play in 1922 with John Barrymore as Holmes and Roland Young in his pre-Topper days as Watson. All the while, Conan Doyle himself was writing the last of the Holmes stories for the Strand magazine and seeing many of his other stories reach the screen, including his classic, The Lost World. And so, Sherlock Holmes and his reluctant creator were finally reconciled. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was not knighted for inventing Sherlock Holmes, but the world knew him for little else. Perhaps he finally welcomed his bastard son to his bosom after they had shared 60 published adventures. More likely, he enjoyed the financial rewards of his labors. Mankind has enjoyed the fruit. As Sherlock Holmes himself put it with characteristic modesty, "I think I may go so far as to say, Watson, that I have not lived wholly in vain. The air of London is the sweeter for my presence." Please join us when we return to examine the most famous Holmes of them all, Basil Rathbone.
Hello.
Sir Arthur Conan Doyle died on July the 7th, 1930, at the age of 71. He left behind a legacy of literary romances, tireless public service, and a strange devotion to a major fad of his time, spiritualism. Doyle succeeded in converting Sir Edward Challenger to this mystical practice in one of his later novels, The Land of Mist. The old explorer of the lost world fell to his knees and cried with joy over his newfound faith. Fortunately for the history of literature, Sherlock Holmes was spared such public humiliation. The great consulting detective maintained his skepticism regarding the supernatural to the last, as he explained to Dr. Watson, "The world is big enough for us. No ghosts need apply." If, however, his creator proved mortal, Holmes himself has shown an almost mystical resistance to the Reaper. In Doyle's lifetime, Holmes had appeared on screen over 100 times. 41 different plays had excited audiences round the world in a dozen languages and thousands of performances. In the 1930s, the advent of synchronized sound was to give Holmes a new dimension. The first Holmes to speak from the screen was Clive Brooke, a former journalist and World War I hero. Brooke's stiff upper lip carried him through 2 Hollywood features and 1 comedy short as Sherlock Holmes. Raymond Massey, best known as Abraham Lincoln on stage and screen, came from Toronto and, like Clive Brooke, served in World War I. As an actor in England, he played many memorable roles in the 1930s, among them Sherlock Holmes in The Speckled Band.
Deadliest snake in India. He would have died within 10 seconds of being bitten.
To English audiences, the definitive Holmes of the screen is Arthur Wontner, who played the part 5 times. Though in his late 50s, when he began in 1931, Wontner brought originality and humanity to his interpretation.
Come in, my dear Professor.
May I point out, Mr. Holmes, that it is a very dangerous habit, keeping a loaded revolver in the pocket of one's dressing gown?
Just a slight precaution.
Danger happens to be part of my trade, Professor.
Danger? It isn't a question of danger, but of inevitable destruction.
I arrest you, Robert Moriarty.
On what charge?
For being concerned in the murder of the stable boy, Edward Hunter. You must excuse me for trespassing on your private property. I've had the lift put in order again.
You clever...
No compliments, please.
Listen, Holmes. There's no prison can hold me.
No, I almost wish that were true, Professor. Life would be very dull without your activity.
One Watson actually became a Holmes. Reginald Owen graduated from Clive Brooke's companion in 1932 to the detective himself in 1933. A Study in Scarlet bears little resemblance to its parent novel. Holmes seems to have moved his lodgings across the hall in this film. His address was given as 221A Baker Street.
A client, Watson. Where? The widow standing under the street lamp.
A widow? Would you like to bet on that?
Of course.
Well, I'm not going down the street to ask her.
Ah. Won't be necessary. She's made up her mind.
So you deduce at a distance, eh?
Not in this case. I recognized her features. She's a Mrs. Murphy. Her husband was murdered.
Help! Murder! Help! Help! Help!
Holmes! 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 Are you all right? Quite all right. Thank you, Watson. Take them downstairs.
The Hound of the Baskervilles had been filmed 5 times before Basil Rathbone first donned the deerstalker in 1939. A popular screen villain, the 47-year-old native of Johannesburg, South Africa, had proved one of the screen's most able swordsmen. He had already been dispatched once by Leslie Howard and twice by Errol Flynn. As you can see, Rathbone was denied top billing by 20th Century Fox, a mistake not to be repeated by Fox or their successors at Universal. Rathbone's Watson was lovable, bumbling Nigel Bruce, who was 3 years younger than Rathbone, though he looked older. Their chemistry proved sheer magic, and it endured through 14 Holmes features and 8 years of radio.
I take it the new issue of the Strand magazine is out, containing another of your slightly lurid tales.
Indeed.
And what do you call this one? You disappoint me, Professor.
Indeed?
Yes. Somehow I always thought that in the end, you'd prove to be just an ordinary cutthroat.
You know me better, Holmes.
Gas, poison, bullets. I assure you, Professor, were our positions reversed, I should have something more colorful, more imaginative to offer.
I'm satisfied to be the winner. I shall be alive.
Alive, yes. The winner, no. For in the last analysis, I shall have proved the more resourceful man. You didn't trap me here. I came here because I wanted to prevent your getting Hoffner. And all you can do in return is to commit ordinary murder to relieve your sense of frustration.
And what, my good Mr. Holmes, could you have conceived that would have been so much more colorful?
Well, even offhand, I can improve upon your suggestions considerably, but that's only natural, of course.
And what is this brilliant idea of yours?
You know that a man dies if he loses 5 pints of blood? Yes, of course you do. I should have you placed on an operating table. Inject a needle into your veins and slowly draw off your life's blood.
The needle to the last. Eh, Holmes?
Slowly, drop by drop, the blood would be drawn from your body. You would be aware of every exquisite second to the very end. You would be watching yourself die scientifically, noting every reaction, and in full possession of your faculties.
Interesting. Closer to the end, Holmes. Closer and closer. Each second, a few more drops leave your desiccated body. And you can feel them, can't you? You're perfectly conscious, aren't you, Holmes?
I shall be conscious long after you're dead, Moriarty.
Ha! Still the same old swaggering, conceited Sherlock Holmes. I expected you, but not with my revolver.
You realize, of course, when I was brought into the room blindfolded, that I heard the mechanism of this door?
Of course.
And yet, knowing that I'd heard it, you planned this way of escape. Not very flattering to me. Suicide, my dear Professor.
Not at all, my dear Holmes. You see, this is not an ordinary passageway. Oh, my mistake. It has been as equally well prepared as the rest of my humble quarters. I have a trap set, electric eye principle. My passing through will break the beam and automatically open a highly deceptive trap door. Behind me, of course, my pursuer, meaning you, my dear Holmes, will then be plunged 60 feet into the sewers below. Holmes!
Holmes! Poor Moriarty. I neglected to warn him. It seems some careless person came across his trap door and left it open. Come along, Watson. Hello, here comes a client, unless I'm very much mistaken.
Well, oh, attractive. Very attractive.
Obviously, she left home under the stress of some very great emotion.
How do you know that?
She wasn't wearing any gloves. A startling omission in a young lady of fashion.
No, she didn't put her coat on. Open car, too.
Furthermore, there's something in that bag she wants to show me.
What makes you say that?
The bag doesn't match her dress, indicating it was picked for size rather than style, to accommodate some bulky object.
You amaze me, Holmes.
What I mentioned, my dear fellow.
Whoever's behind all this thing must be out of his mind.
On the contrary, my dear fellow, if my assumptions are correct, this little scheme has behind it the most brilliant and ruthless intellect the world has ever known.
You don't mean Professor Moriarty?
I do.
Oh, steady, Holmes. You've got him on the brain. This is the third time in as many months you've suspected him of unsolved crimes. He's dead, you know.
Is he?
Is he? You know he is.
But I'll stake my reputation that Moriarty is alive and here, now in London. Oh, Professor Moriarty. Not that I wish to appear inquisitive, but to what am I indebted for the pleasure of this visit? Scotland Yard will be interested.
As I get on in life, the little comforts appeal to me more and more.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Won't you sit down?
Thank you.
And now, Professor Moriarty, what can I do for you?
Everything that I have to say to you has already crossed your mind.
And my answer has no doubt crossed yours.
That's final?
What do you think? I shall not rest until you are hanged for the finger murders. And now, Professor, our score is settled. Au revoir until I see you on the gallows.
The rope has not been made that'll go around my neck.
Come on.
An evil man, Holmes, but what a horrible death.
Better than he deserved.
The chap doesn't want to open the door, probably.
This should help us.
Hello? Who shut that door? Great Scott, the guard.
Murderer came back from the scene.
Academic.
Look again, old fellow. Scratch. Just a scratch. Like the one on one of Carstairs.
Small dot. Apparently made of some soluble substance.
Probably a gelatin preparation that melts in the wound. That's why you couldn't see anything on Carstairs. The murderer was about to get rid of the body. He heard the knock and became frightened. Here, let me have that, will you? Interesting.
Now what?
Or just a coincidence.
What's a coincidence?
The fact that this fellow Kilbane happens to be a professor of mathematics.
Oh. Come again, Mr. Holmes?
Lestrade, did you ever hear of Colonel Sebastian Moran?
Of course I did. What about him?
Well, then, as you know, Colonel Sebastian Moran was the most sinister, ruthless, and diabolically clever henchman of our late but unlamented friend, Professor Moriarty. I've never seen him, but I've been unpleasantly conscious of his presence more than once.
I say, Holmes,
What?
it's morning.
Allow me to congratulate you on a brilliant bit of deduction. It's not a transposition, not a polygraph transposition, not a trigraph, nor any known form of decoding.
How about the Morse code? Have you tried that?
Yes, at about 3 o'clock this morning.
I'm sorry, old man. I was only trying to help. Oh, do me a favor. Not again. Must have heard that thing 1,000 times. Kept me awake all night.
Not a very distinguished composition, I grant you.
You know perfectly well I don't know one tune from the other. When I was a kid, my people tried to have me taught the piano. I've always felt sorry for that old teacher of mine. The poor old girl finally reached the point of numbering the keys for me. 1, 2, 3, 4. Even then, I never progressed beyond...
Numbering the keys, Watson. The 19th key of the keyboard is the 19th letter of the alphabet. S. Here. Write it down when I give it to you, old fellow, will you? The first altered note. Write S first. Now, the 8th key is H. The 5th key, E. The 12th key, L. The 6th key, F.
S-H-E-L-F. Shelf.
Your piano lessons were not in vain, old fellow. You've solved it. Thank you.
Now, up with him, Hamid. Plenty of fuel in the tank? Good. It would be too bad to have anything go wrong through so simple an oversight.
Bank of England plate.
Well, Mrs. Courtney, so we meet again. No, I shouldn't do that if I were you, Colonel Cavanaugh.
I must congratulate you, Mr. Holmes. You're far more clever than I thought.
Thank you, Mrs. Courtney. Praise from you is indeed gratifying. I shall always cherish the memory of your flattering words.
Memory? Oh, thank you.
And now I have a most regrettable task to perform.
Holmes, you all right?
Perfectly, thank you, old fellow, but I think this gentleman on the floor requires some medical attention. We must see that he looks his best, you know, when he's hanged.
Upon commencement of production of The Hound of the Baskervilles in 1939, Basil Rathbone enthused, "I think that Holmes is one of the greatest characters in fiction. To play such a role means as much to me as 10 Hamlets." In later years, however, he looked back upon his sojourn at Baker Street with less enthusiasm. "I don't know how Watson put up with Holmes all those years. I don't know how I did. The only mystery I couldn't solve was the same one Conan Doyle had, how to get rid of the man. As far as the world is concerned, neither of them ever will."
A great detective relies on perception, intelligence, and imagination.
Where'd you get that rubbish from?
It's framed on the wall behind you.
Here's a good trivia question for you. When did Sherlock Holmes make his television debut? Was it 1937, 1947, or 1957? The correct answer is 1937. Actor Louis Hector had played the part on NBC radio and became television's first Holmes when the network broadcast a full evening of experimental television in November 1937. 12 years passed before Holmes reappeared on the small screen, this time in the person of Alan Napier, best known to television audiences as Batman's butler. John Longdon had appeared in 4 Alfred Hitchcock films and many others before starring in an ill-fated 35-minute television film of 1951. It was called The Man with the Twisted Lip, based on the Conan Doyle story of the same name.
It was a matter of simple deduction, madam. Surely any woman whose husband has disappeared would go at once to his office and speak to his business associates in an endeavor to learn of his whereabouts. Since you have no such knowledge, it is obvious that you do not know where your husband's office is, nor do you know who his associates are. The only explanation is that your husband not only has failed to tell you of his affairs, but has, moreover, forbidden you to learn of them. Why?
I don't know.
Not surprisingly, the next television Holmes was, that's right, Basil Rathbone. The screen's most famous Holmes was not done with the character yet. He not only made scattered appearances on television, but even tried to mount a stage production in 1953 written by his wife. Its failure on Broadway, coupled with the untimely death of Nigel Bruce, marked the end of an era and Rathbone's last appearance as Holmes. But Sherlock Holmes' television career was just getting started.
I won't allow Holmes to investigate.
A court order was issued this morning.
A court order for what?
The exhumation of Sir Charles's body. The autopsy has been completed. Sir Charles died from arsenic poisoning.
In 1954, actor Ronald Howard appeared in a series of 39 television films made in France. The son of screen immortal Leslie Howard, he was one of the youngest to play the part.
difficulty.
Or was it?
Well, according to my deductions, I should imagine that someone is at the door.
Holmes! What are you doing?
Well, I hope I didn't alarm you, old chap. I'm just taking gun prints.
This is the end.
The BBC has produced many Holmes adventures over the years, featuring such distinguished stars as Alan Wheatley, Douglas Wilmer, Peter Cushing, and Tom Baker. Other British-produced television shows have starred Ian Richardson and Jeremy Brett. Some would even find Holmes an object for humor. The same story which marked the debut of Basil Rathbone as Sherlock Holmes became the vehicle whereby a young Londoner made his first appearance in a film about the great detective some 20 years later. I did not play Sherlock Holmes in The Hound of the Baskervilles in 1959. Rather, I portrayed one of the title characters, and not the Hound. As Sir Henry Baskerville, I was menaced not only by the legendary phosphorescent canine, but also by a tarantula. Luckily, I was rescued by my good friend Peter Cushing. He played the immortal Holmes in the first feature film about the sleuth to be shot in color.
Sir Henry, keep perfectly still if you value your life.
In 1962, a German film company offered me a chance to play Holmes myself in Sherlock Holmes and the Deadly Necklace. Thorley Walters played my Watson and later repeated the role briefly for Gene Wilder. Unfortunately, our voices were replaced on the soundtrack by those of other actors.
Watson, for the last time. Here, on guard. All right, if you insist.
Show business. 8 years later, I accomplished something achieved by no other actor. I became the first Sherlock Holmes who went on to play his brother Mycroft in Billy Wilder's The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes.
This is my brother Sherlock, ma'am.
Ah, yes. Sherlock Holmes. We have been following your exploits with great interest.
Thank you, ma'am.
In a moment, we shall see the triumphant return of Sherlock Holmes to the stage, plus his continuing career on screen and television, where he fought everything from criminals and psychiatrists to drug addiction and the British government itself. Don't go away.
I am on the case, and you have placed me there. Now you must follow my instructions. And have the goodness to fetch Dr. Watson's revolver.
Sherlock Holmes. Patriotic, courageous, tenacious, loyal, mind of a computer, and one of the most eccentric characters in fiction. In 1970, George C. Scott portrayed a man who thought he was Sherlock Holmes in They Might Be Giants. His Watson in this poignant comedy was the first woman to play the part, Joanne Woodward. Later, The film was remade for television with Larry Hagman of Dallas in The Return of the World's Greatest Detective. Another American production of Hound of the Baskervilles in 1972 starred Stuart Granger and featured Star Trek's William Shatner as the sinister Stapleton. Gene Wilder was Sherlock Holmes' smarter brother in a comedy send-up of 1975. Douglas Wilmer reprised his role as Sherlock with my Watson, Thorley Walters. Roger Moore, best known as James Bond, played Sherlock Holmes in New York in 1976. Patrick Macnee played Dr. Watson, and the sinister Professor Moriarty was actor-director John Huston. In that same year, 1976, a most unusual Holmes film appeared. The 7% Solution had a drug-crazed Holmes in the person of Nicol Williamson, lured by Robert Duvall as Dr. Watson to the clinic of Dr. Sigmund Freud, played by Alan Arkin.
You may remove that ludicrous beard, and kindly refrain from employing that ridiculous comic operator accent. I warn you, you'd best confess or it will go hard with you, Professor Moriarty.
My name is Sigmund Freud.
But it's no use. My feet are on the inexorable path to destruction.
A man may sometimes retrace his steps.
Not from the fiendish coils of drug addiction. No man can do it.
I have.
We must make ourselves a target. Quickly! Hello!
Well done, Holmes. Bloody well done.
William Gillette's play enjoyed a vigorous revival by the Royal Shakespeare Company in the 1970s with John Wood as Holmes. When the production moved to Los Angeles, Leonard Nimoy played the part. Charlton Heston starred in an original stage adaptation of The Sign of Four, titled The Crucifer of Blood. The biggest Christmas surprise of 1985 is Steven Spielberg's young Sherlock Holmes. Spielberg is today's hottest producer-director, and his film will undoubtedly be an event.
Eta Holmes.
Oh, I might have known.
You dropped this!
Nice. Oh, very nice. Egyptian.
It's only a hallucination. Maybe not. Oh, my God. I came to kill her. Stop! She's alive!
As we approach the 100th anniversary of the first appearance of Sherlock Holmes, we may look back upon his enduring and lively career with some astonishment. What makes him as fascinating to citizens of the nuclear age as he was to readers at the turn of the century? Perhaps, despite all evidence to the contrary, we still seek order in our increasingly disordered universe. Perhaps it is the simple pleasure of watching a master craftsman ply his dangerous trade. As Dr. Watson observed, I had no keener pleasure than in following Sherlock Holmes in his professional investigations and in admiring the rapid deductions with which he unraveled the problems which were submitted to him. May Sherlock Holmes of Baker Street continue to give us all such keen pleasure for many years to come. Since the start of this program, we have been in this recreation of Holmes' sitting room at the Sherlock Holmes public house near Trafalgar Square. Here, you can see mementos of dozens of cases, plus various articles which might have belonged to Holmes and Watson, but actually belonged to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and were inspirations to his writing. Sherlock Holmes described himself in simple terms. I'm a consulting detective, if you can understand what that is. Here in London, we have lots of government detectives and we have lots of private ones. When these fellows are at fault, they come to me, and I manage to put them on the right scent. They lay all the evidence before me, and I am generally able to set them straight. I cannot agree with those who rank modesty among the virtues. My mind is like a racing machine, tearing itself to pieces because it is not connected up with the work for which it was built. I cannot live without brain work. My life is spent in one long effort to escape the commonplaces of existence. Let us take a final look at our distinguished list of players as they show us a few of the many faces of Sherlock Holmes.
You're the new boy?
Yes, I transferred from another school. My name's...
Wait. Let me. Your name is James Watson. You're from the north of England. Your father is a doctor. You spend a considerable amount of leisure time writing, and you have a particular fondness for custard tarts. Am I correct?
My name isn't James, it's John.
Oh, James, John, what's the difference?
A great deal.
Very well. So your name is John. How did I do on the others?
You were correct. On every count. How's it done? Is it some sort of magic trick?
No, no magic, Watson. Pure and simple deduction.
He drew out his entire balance in cash, nearly £10,000, yesterday, just after that young woman was murdered. What does that suggest you, Watson?
That he paid it out to someone.
Precisely. I smell the faint, sweet odor of blackmail.
You don't think he paid it out to someone who saw him murder the McLean woman?
Sir George never murdered anyone.
But he did have that woman's finger, and he empty did have and pay out a lot of cash.
That's the terrifying part about blackmail, Watson. The victim is afraid to fight the accusation, no matter how false. Once the accusation is made, the name is smeared, and sometimes his life is ruined.
Well, Sir George didn't commit these murders. What fiend did?
I rather think they're not the work of any one man.
Oh, come, Holmes. You don't expect me to believe there's a whole organization going about killing people and chopping off their fingers?
That's possible, quite possible.
Watson, what are you doing?
I'm trying to corner the last pea on my plate. Squashed my pea.
What do you make of it all, Holmes?
It's innocent looking enough at first sight, Watson. But the fact that Straker was not interested in football persuaded me that this is not to be taken at its face value. You observed, of course, that the name of Martin appeared in both the letter and the telegram.
Yes, it struck me as curious.
It is highly significant, Watson. This telegram is peculiarly interesting.
You mean it's in code?
Yes, and a very elementary one. By simply crossing out each alternate word, the message assumes an entirely different meaning. Instead of a request, it becomes a peremptory order. For final instructions, meet as agreed. Martin.
What did the postmaster at Coombe Tracy tell you?
He described the senders, two strangers, unquestionably Moriarty and Moran.
We are getting on, Watson. I'm glad to see you in a more cheerful mood. We've done remarkably well. I'm pleased. I admit I could do with a little explanation. I, too, feel a little curious. I considered the claims of Whitaker's almanac. As I suspected, the large number represented the page, the second, the small number, the column, and the other figures, the message. You'll find it decoded on the table. Meeting of Scarlet Ring, Tuesday.
Limehouse. Him. Very due. Possibly. Tomorrow will appear in the personal column of the Daily Telegraph a second message, a request for information. Your message? My message. And the next step? The need of fresh air will take me in the country tomorrow. In the meantime, relaxation, music. I hope I won't bore you. Not if you make it soft.
Well, what?
A singing violin.
Well, that's fantastic.
Yes, a fiend with a diabolical mind, our Mr. Durham. Soap on the bow so that no sound should come from it, and this. Come along, Watson.
Ah, the game's afoot again. This hat is 3 years old. The flat brim curled at the edges came in then. It belongs, Watson, to a man who has suddenly gone down in the world. He's middle-aged, goes out little, and has grizzled hair which has been cut in the last few days.